Hi, this is Ed Spurliers. I hope you enjoy this latest episode of Random Trek. Thank you very much. Yeah?
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Random Trek. I am your faithful first officer, Brennan Mystical Mar. And our captain has come down with the Klingon version of the measles. So it's up to me to guide us today. I wanted to talk today about what is my favorite Star Trek series. There have been more than 10 Star Trek series spanning almost 60 years. Now, I grew up on The Next Generation. My mom was a big fan of it. And I remember as a kid watching episodes from seasons 5, 6, and 7. Some of those I only remember vaguely, but others, like Face of the Enemy, I remember vividly, as well as Phantasms, and even the finale, All Good Things. So suffice to say, The Next Generation holds a special place in my heart. As I got a little bit older, 13, 14, Deep Space Nine really caught my attention. I didn't watch every episode, but I was familiar enough with the progress of the story. The Next Generation is a very episodic show. Deep Space Nine gives us big, gigantic story arcs. The Dominion War. Now, I don't know if the creators of Deep Space Nine intended, when they began, to have a huge Dominion War story arc. But regardless, that became part of the show from about season 3 all the way to the end. The first 2 seasons had a few story arcs involving Bajor recovering from the Cardassian occupation. But none of those were particularly that interesting, in my opinion, and it became more of an episodic show, like The Next Generation. The only difference is that they're on a space station instead of a starship. But then they took the story of the wormhole even farther to say that the Dominion and their Jem'Hadar soldiers were a threat from the Gamma Quadrant that were now coming into the Alpha Quadrant to start a war. And the Cardassians get pulled into that, and so on and so forth. The point I'm trying to make is it is difficult to decide between the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, which of the shows is my favorite? One of the strong points of Star Trek, one of the Star Trek strong points is the characters. And I would say that both casts of Next Gen and DS9 are magnificent, and the characters are too. This has been true since the original series. We enjoy these characters, and we want to see their adventures. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are the ultimate triumvirate of characters that I don't think any Star Trek series is quite done. That's not an insult to the other shows. It just, I don't think anyone could quite match the dynamic between those three characters. But Next Generation gives us some fan favorites. Captain Picard, I mean, good grief. Worf, our favorite Klingon. Brent Spiner's Data. Data is a character that connected with so many people. Geordie LaForge, I mean, but those of us who grew up in that era, LeVar Burton was Geordie LaForge and the host of Reading Rainbow. And for those who are older than us, Kunta Kinte from Roots, a very familiar character that people remember and people like. Unfortunately, I do not think that Counselor Troy and Dr. Crusher really got their due on the show. Star Trek Picard Season 3 has given us much better and more interesting storylines for those two characters that they didn't get on the Next Generation. Now, as far as DS9, I don't think there's a weak character in there. I think all the characters get their due. I think that Cisco and Kira and Dax and Bashir and O'Brien and many others, Quark, Odo, and then you have the villains. Gul Dukat might be the best villain as far as the TV shows are concerned in Star Trek. Khan, I think, is the ultimate Star Trek villain in the movies. But judging by the show, I don't think anyone is a better villain than Gul Dukat. Mark Alamo is a terrific actor. And what they did with the character of Dukat really was very good and very well thought out. And the more the deeper you go into his character, the more you realize his villainy. So there's that too. And then other minor characters like Rom, General Martok, Morn, of course, and adding other flavors. Damar, Wayoon, many others. So I think if I had to judge it by the characters, I think DS9's characters are better in terms of giving everyone their due. Now, in terms of storylines, Next Gen has an incredible storytelling, and DS9 does too. But they're very different in their storytelling. But I must say, as far as finales, both shows have extremely fulfilling finales. But what they did with All Good Things in Next Gen, bringing everything back to the beginning with Q, is marvelous. And DS9's ending might be the most emotionally hard hitting because it's the end of this terrible war. And sometimes it's difficult when you write a great storyline to finish it satisfactorily. DS9 does it. And both shows make me cry. DS9 gets me pretty hard. Of the glory and the horror of war. The victory of the bad guys, yes. The cost, though, terrible. It's hard to decide between the two shows which one works better for me. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a dead heat. It's a tie. Each of them has their strengths, and each of them is able to tell these very compelling stories with, forgive the word, very human characters. I mean, yes, we're dealing with aliens, but in terms of exploring what it means to be human, that's something that science fiction has always dealt with. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to deal with the troubles of being human? And DS9 and Next Gen deal with that so well. And I can't think of a more human character than the guy who appeared on both shows, Colin Meaney as Miles O'Brien. He is the most down to earth human. And it's interesting because he goes through the worst experiences. But even the characters who are not human, what they're dealing with is very much human. And both shows deal with it so well. The only other thing I would say is religion. Now, in the Next Generation, there are a few episodes that deal with religion, but it is frowned upon by Picard and some of the others. Because in the imagination of Gene Roddenberry, such a thing didn't really exist in the future. But DS9 turns that on its ear. DS9, we're dealing with the prophets, which are, depending on your point of view, aliens who live in the wormhole. But maybe they're more than aliens. I don't know. the whole storyline of Cisco being the emissary of the prophets is fascinating. Now we deal with characters like Kai Wynn and Burial Antos and the corruption of religion. Kai Wynn is a great example of basically a false prophet, a hypocrite. So we see the dark side of religion, that people can twist it to their own will. But on the other end, when the Federation is driven off of DS9 and Cisco decides to retake it, he asks the prophets for help. And in a miracle, they help him. And they're able to take back the station. There is an element of faith in Deep Space Nine that is not in Next Gen. Though that's not entirely true. There are moments like Rightful Heir on Next Gen that involve taking a leap of faith. But DS9 really looks at the concept in a more nuanced way about the good and bad that people can do when it comes to religion. And that's something that connects with me very deeply. So I could go on, but to me, it's a tie between the two shows. They're both extraordinary. And I think there's a bit of nostalgia there too, because I grew up with it. Just as our good friends Scott Nance and Steve Morris grew up with the original series, so it will always be their favorite. But for me, growing up in Next Gen and DS9, that's when my love of Star Trek began and continues to this day. And so for me, that's why I love both these shows. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. You can find me on Blue Sky, Brennan Marr, X for the time being, at Brennan Mystical, Threads and Instagram at Brennan Blue, and on YouTube at Page Turners They Were Not. Also under the same name at Apple and Spotify. Well, as we always end every episode, Qapla', live long and prosper, peace, and long life.